Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 877 for the 27th of July 2025. Richard Saunders coming to you from Sydney, Australia. And there's nothing like a little bit of jet lag to make you wake up bright and early. And while I was away, I hope you managed to do some goals. I hope you managed to achieve some goals, even if it was simply house maintenance and a bit of spring cleaning. Coming up on this week's show, it's a show of many parts. Part 2, we're going to kick off part 2 of our interview with Dr Eugenie Scott about the 100th anniversary of the Scopes monkey trial. And Jeannie tells me, and by all accounts, the event that she talks about was a great success, having occurred in the last couple of weeks. Following that, it's the return of Psychic Penny, the mysterious Psychic Penny with part 1 of her horoscopes. This week, her mystical insights are for Aries, Taurus, Gemini and Cancer. After that, for crying out loud, it's Kat McLeod once again with part 2 of her interviews from Lilicon, the Lilienfeld Alliance for Teaching of Rational Skepticism in Higher Education. This week, Kat talks to attendees Nicole and Ian, also Dr Natalia Pasternak and Sam Billings. Then to round off this week's episode, the Trove continues from last week. This is part 2 of our look at a report on Uri Geller all the way back from 1973, the early days. Well, that's enough for me at the moment. It's time for me to run downstairs and have a litre of coffee to keep awake. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Pick up part 2 of our conversation with Eugenie Scott about the centenary of the Scopes monkey trial.
Another thing that makes the Scopes trial the trial of the century is that it was listened to live by a very large audience. Media took an extremely large role in the Scopes trial. They, of course, previous trials and trials subsequently are covered by the written press, which was the issue of the major communication of the time, newspapers, magazines, and the like. But the Scopes trial also was covered live by radio station WGN from Chicago. Yeah. Now, radio was a pretty big deal. And in fact, the idea of having a home radio in your house was a pretty new idea. Mm-hmm. Radio was the internet of its day. It was the new technology that really revolutionized how information gets passed around. And so WGN came down to cover it live. They had microphones set all over the courtroom, and there were miles of telegraph line that were sent out because reporters from all over the country, in fact, all over the world. European newspapers sent reporters as well. And reporters from literally all over the world flocked to this tiny little Dayton, Tennessee, in the middle of no place. And they needed to send back their reports. So they set up all kinds of telegraph lines. And, of course, WGN Broadcasting Live was extraordinary. You know, you just wish that the technology had been so well developed that it would have been possible to record it. But
it was going to be my next question, but not. Oh dear! But I mean, we have the transcripts.
We have the transcripts.
But it wouldn't have been wonderful to hear it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And William Jennings Bryan, in particular, was known for his oratory skills. And although, interestingly enough, pretty much everybody who attended the trial really thought that one of the defense lawyers gave the best speech of the. Anyway, it goes on.
So it was a century ago And we've got a century of history in this field to look back on, this creationism, the constant battle. What are your thoughts when we say it's a century?
The issues that were part of the Scopes trial are still around. Most obviously, anti-evolutionism. It's much less than it was, say, 20 years ago, but it's still around. It's kind of like background radiation. It's going to be there, and periodically it flares up. Possibly here in the United States, it may be in for a resurgence because of some recent legal decisions, which are scary for those of us who live here. But that is a wait and see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens in the next couple of years in terms of state legislatures and local communities deciding whether to bring in some form of creationism or just eliminate evolution because it's too controversial. That is always a worry. But not just the creation and evolution issue, but think about the communications issue. At the time of the Scopes trial, the big deal was radio. At the time of the O.J. Simpson trial, the big communication mode was television. Yeah. And the O.J. Simpson trial was broadcast on television. It was seen by a phenomenal percentage of Americans, and maybe even internationally.
Oh, certainly, yes.
Yeah. And the next big trial is probably going to be discussed and disseminated by the internet.
Probably.
And rather than by trained journalists, shall we say. Not to disparage people who have blogs and YouTube accounts and stuff like that. But in all seriousness, I mean, as well as I, we skeptics know there's a lot of rubbish on the internet.
Yes.
And a lot of rubbish which is spread about by people who do not look, frankly, journalistically and critically at the kinds of materials they are covering or discussing.
No, there's many reasons for that, ranging from it doesn't fit their mandate, and they don't have time. A lot of the time, they don't have time. They need to get something out and get to the next story.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I'm not saying that journalists are always perfect. Certainly not. But someone who is a professional journalist, trained in journalistic techniques, where you check your sources and you don't claim that something is the case unless you've got several versions of it and several sources that don't all come back to the same source. I mean, there are ways of cross-checking and producing valid information that many independent influencers, shall we say, ignore, don't know about, or don't care about. Yeah. And if we are going to, in the next big trial of the century, if we're going to be getting our information from largely uninformed people, this is something that we might want to be concerned about. Yeah, and of course the other issues raised in the Scopes trial about freedom of conscience, freedom of thought, those are always the case. I mean, we can pick up any newspaper today in the United States and see examples of people whose opinions are being truncated in some fashion or another because they are, there's opposition to them from either other people online or, alas, the government and so forth. So freedom of thought and freedom of expression are still important. But one of the main issues in the real Scopes trial, as opposed to Inherit the Wind, is how do you organize education? William Jennings Bryan's major position was, he who pays the piper calls the tune. In other words, since the state pays for education, the state can bloody well tell you what to teach. Whereas the position of the ACLU supporting John Scopes was that teachers should have the academic freedom to teach what they consider to be valid scholarship, whether it's science or history or math or whatever, and should not, the hand of the state should not be too heavy. In the United States, and probably Australia too, we have evolved kind of a compromise where we do allow experts, like expert historians and expert math teachers, to determine how things are taught and what the curriculum should be and so forth. But the state does have a role. In Brian's position, the state should have the role full stop. And if the state says don't teach evolution, you just click your heels and salute smartly and stop teaching evolution. So those issues are still around. The reason for finding out more about the Scopes trial is just that it's such a good story. It's just a ripping good story and worthwhile learning about, because it so many little twists and turns, and so many funny little things that happened. Of course, the trial itself was an absolute circus. Yeah. People came in not only from Tennessee, but from out of state as well. And of course, you had tons of reporters from all over the world, literally. But there were not enough, there certainly were not enough hotels in this tiny little, 1,600 people town, rounding up, including suburbs, surrounding farms. And so, people were renting out their sheds and their barns and their spare rooms, and just to kind of put these people up somehow or another. You had basically carnival barkers coming up,
Really?
and selling Bible-themed items or evolution-themed items. And one guy even brought a trained chimpanzee. I mean, it was just a total circus. I mean, it was just total, I never mentioned, I should have mentioned at the beginning, that the Scopes trial is not what people think it is in many ways. It's not Inherit the Wind. It was basically a publicity stunt, because a law had been passed in the Tennessee legislature that you could not teach anything that disagreed with the Bible. And so evolution disagrees with the Bible, with at least a literal interpretation of the Bible. So it was out. It was an anti-evolution law. The law was passed, and the ACLU, which was the American Civil Liberties Union, which was just getting started back in 1924, 1925, wanted to have a test case for freedom of conscience, freedom of speech. And so the ACLU advertised in the Chattanooga newspaper for a plaintiffs. Is there a plaintiff who would like to challenge the Butler Act, this anti-evolution act? And one of the businessmen in Dayton, Tennessee, was reading the Chattanooga newspaper and saw this ad and ran down to the local drugstore and called some of the other local civic leaders and said, "We ought to find a plaintiff. This will really put Dayton on the map." And what we could do is we could have we could make it a whole summer of intellectual foment. We could have a Chautauqua series, and this would just be it'd bring money into the town because they needed it, but it would also be a real intellectual experience. And so let's find a plaintiff, and that's how they found John Scopes.
Wow, okay.
And of course, John Scopes was basically he was a math teacher and football coach, and had never taught biology, except once he had substituted for the biology teacher during the review period. And so they said, well, John, have you taught evolution? He said, well, I might have during the review. It's in the textbook, so I might have. Good enough for us. and I mean, that's right. There's all these little funny things that happened in the course of the trial that just make it just delightful. But Rapelier, the businessman who saw the Chattanooga article, was not the only one who noticed that Chattanooga ad that the ACLU had posted. And there was another, person in Tennessee who was also, well, let's find a plaintiff for our town. So there was another community which was also toying with the idea of finding a plaintiff. And so the good burghers of Dayton persuaded the Ray County grand jury to meet 3 months early to indict John Scopes so that they could be the ones to be the plaintiff. So there are all kinds of little funny things like that went on in this trial that just make it a delight to learn about. Still, one of the best books on the Scopes trial, if anybody wants to read it, is Ed Larson's Summer of the Gods, which won a Pulitzer when it came out. It came out, in the 90s or 2000s. It's been around for a while, but he's a historian and a lawyer. And the book is very, very good. And it gets into a lot of these little quirky things that make the Scopes trial such a ripping good read. So I would recommend learning more about it.
Well, Eugenie Scott, thank you very much. It's amazing that it's a century. We can only speculate what the state of play will be in another century from now. I mean, we can't even seriously know what's going to be like in 10 years from now. I mean, the state of politics and society at the moment is, shall we say, unpredictable.
And the state of science and science education. I'll tell you what. 100 years, let's do this again, yep. And we'll report on what the circumstances are.
Until then, Eugenie Scott, thank you very much.
It was fun. Bye-bye. Hello, I'm Eugenie Scott, Bay Area Skeptics. Now, this is not going to be especially relevant to my Australian friends and to other international people listening to this broadcast, but if you are in Northern California or the vicinity thereof, try to join us on August 23rd, 2025 for Skeptical, Northern California's Conference for Science and Skepticism. We have a wonderful array of speakers. We have our wonderful Global Skeptics in the Pub for you to join from wherever you are around the planet. This spherical Earth of ours, not flat. And if you want to have more information about Skeptical, go to www.skepticalcon.org, and you'll find out information about specifics on the speakers, on Global Skeptics in the Pub, and other useful information. Please join us. We're so excited to be having our 13th Skeptical in person again after a few years off from the COVID epidemic. August 23rd, 2025.
It's time for Psychic Penny's Zodiac, a real horoscope.
Welcome, seeker of universal knowledge, to the chambers of Psychic Penny. Through my contacts at the Galactic Federation, I am able to see beyond the stars. In fact, not long ago, they took me beyond the stars to realms undreamt of. With my mystical insights, I am now the world's #1 astrologer in Canada. Shh. Listen. My calculus cosmic candles are burning, surrounding my misty and mystical crystal calcium ball that tells all for the low price of crossing my palm with real Canadian maple syrup. Prepare now for your personalized horoscope reading. This week, we look at the star signs of Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and Cancer. Aries. Mars is in retro jazz formation, which means your trousers may suddenly rhyme. You'll discover a new use for teaspoons involving synchronized winking. A platypus in your dreams offers financial advice, and I suggest you take it seriously. Now, Taurus. Venus flips a coin and forgets what it landed on. But today you will feel oddly attracted to cheese graters and small ornamental ducks. An old sock brings romantic news. And I dare you to sniff it bravely. Gemini. Both of your personalities will argue over soup. Mercury demands you travel by pogo stick. Take steps to avoid elevators and people who say curdle too enthusiastically. And I was talking with Adrienne the other day, and when she was in the Bermuda Triangle, she took this advice to avoid elevators on the cruise, despite the fact she is not Gemini. Cancer. Your shell is emotionally waterproof, but beware of emotional snails. This week, you will win a staring contest with the moon. Congratulations. Your prize is the moon, and you may claim it in person on the moon. Thank you, seeker of eternal wisdom. My psychic energy is fast fading as the calcium clouds my crystal ball callously. I will need to re-energize it by putting it on the windowsill during a full moon. I hope my horoscope resonates with the higher frequencies of your lower self on the quantum field. Until next time, this is Psychic Penny going back into a mystical trance.
Do you love science? Are you skeptical about the world around you? Are you intrigued by ghost hunting gadgets, psychics, men in black, or paranormal beliefs? Then, if you're in the area, join us for West Virginia's first ever Skeptic Camp, a one-day conference dedicated to science, skepticism, and critical thinking. Hosted by the West Virginia Skeptic Society in partnership with the Clarksburg-Harrison Public Library, we will explore strange and mysterious topics, but through the lens of scientific skepticism. Hear from speakers like the Center for Inquiry's Kenny Biddle and the Skeptic Zone's very own Susan Gerbic, and more. Join us on Saturday, October 18th from 10 a.m. until 6:30 p.m. at the Clarksburg-Harrison Public Library in Clarksburg, West Virginia for a fun-filled day of prizes, science, critical thinking, and skepticism.
For crying out loud, it's Kat McLeod.
This is Kat McLeod, coming to you from latitude 53.5-ish in the Northern Hemisphere. If you tuned in last week, which I'm sure you did, you heard part 1 of my interviews from the 2025 Lilicon Conference, held at MacEwan University here in Edmonton, Alberta. As promised, here is part 2 of my interviews from day 2 of the conference. I'm here on day 2 of Lilicon in the Conference Center at MacEwan University, and I'm here with 2 fellow attendees. Could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Nicole.
And I'm Ian.
Ian, you participated this morning in the quiz that Natalia, Pasternak, and Dr. Christopher Labos put on. How fun was that for you?
It was pretty fun. I kind of just copied what they were doing because they kept saying it out loud, and I didn't have enough time to really think about it, but it was pretty fun.
You were very brave to go up there with all those experts and try and figure out which logical fallacy was being used in these headlines. Do you have a lot of experience with critical thinking so far, or is this a new experience for you?
I wouldn't say I'm an expert on it. Like, I don't have a lot of experience on it, but it is something I find interesting. So
did you bring Ian here today? And if so, was it your idea or his?
Yes, I did. So Ian is my son. He's 14. He's going into grade 10 in the fall. So I brought up to Ian that I was going to be attending this conference, and I showed him the speakers and who was going to be here, and he expressed interest that he thought that was pretty cool, and he was wondering if he could attend with us. So I had the opportunity to reach out and let the organizers know, and they said, yeah, bring him, and it's been a really cool experience to do together.
I love that. I was somebody very similar to you, where I was going to conferences like this when I was, 13, 14, 15 years old. So is this your first conference experience?
Yes, this is the first conference I've ever been to.
Are you enjoying it?
Yes, there's lots of information to take in, but it's really cool.
So Ian, what's a key takeaway that you're going to take with you after this conference?
So I think it is very important to be able to understand what misinformation could be being spread. It's very fascinating to see how easy misinformation could be presented as true in a very believable way if you're just good at speaking and just being able to look at what you are being told and figure out for yourself what you think is true and what isn't. That is.
Thank you so much. Do you have a key takeaway?
I think a huge takeaway from these type of conferences is how this doesn't just have to be for academia. And I think that's because I'm a registered psychologist, so I'm here as a practitioner, not necessarily as an instructor. And I think that I can take this information not only with my son, but into my work and helping use these skills to talk to the youth that I work with in my practice about some of these ideas. So I think that if I'm taking anything away, it's that you don't have to just be in academia, you don't have to be an instructor. These skills are transferable to all different careers and just in talking with people in general. So that's a big thing I'm taking away.
I mean, you stole the closing that I was going to use because I am not, an academic either. So thank you both so much for your time and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
I'm here with the brilliant Dr. Natalia Pasternak, who had a session yesterday as well as a fabulous game this morning. So I have to ask you, what's one key takeaway that you're hoping participants are leaving with after this conference?
I think it would be shared experiences and activities and really new ideas of how to bring critical thinking into our classes, because we have to be creative as professors and we have to be engaging, and it's hard when you're on your own trying to design new activities and new assignments and new evaluations. So I think one of the things that we really wanted to do with lilicon was to bring professors together and say, okay, so what is it that you're doing in your classroom and can I copy it?
I'm sure a lot of people are taking away that message. As somebody who's not an academic, and I've spoken to other non-academics also attending this, we're still getting so much out of this conference. So we really appreciate that you're putting it on. What's one message that you learned from this conference that maybe you are going to adopt in the future?
Well, I think that one big message would be how interdisciplinary the teaching of critical thinking is. I mean, we have people here from every field you can imagine. We have professors of biology, physics, philosophy, psychology, and we're all kind of teaching very similar courses. So in a way, we have a lot of overlapping, and on the other hand, some are really specific to their fields, but the general idea is to really get our students to be able to think critically, not only in their specific fields, but in their regular daily lives. So I think this is what really brings us together, that critical thinking is a skill that you take for life, not just for your professional life, but your personal life, your relationships, what are you going to talk about in your Sunday brunch with your family, and hopefully you still be invited to the Sunday brunch after that.
Well, thank you so much. Do you have any other messages that you'd like to leave for the Skeptic Zone listeners?
Well, if you are a professor and you're teaching a course on critical thinking, please join the Lilienfeld Alliance and come to the next Lilicons.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. This is Kat McLeod. We're coming to the end of the conference, and I'm here with Sam Billings. Last time I saw you, I was speaking to your class. I'm wondering, what's your biggest takeaway from the conference?
I would have to say that the emphasis on keeping an open mind, but using that critical lens, so that idea of making sure that you're being respectful of others, while also thinking critically about what's being said and analyzing and taking and balancing both sides of a situation or of an idea.
And have you enjoyed the conference over the last 2 days?
Yeah, it's been a fantastic conference. The speakers have been excellent and done a good job of covering the breadth of critical thinking of all different aspects, from the human element all the way up to machine learning.
So people should definitely come next year.
Absolutely. The more the merrier.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So that's a wrap on Lilicon for 2025. We had presenters from various backgrounds, including biology, chemistry, psychiatry, and physics. The attendees came from various backgrounds as well. While most of them were academics, not all of them were, clearly, because Ian is only 14 years old. You too could attend next year. Word on the street is that on May 21st and 22nd in 2026, the Lilicon will be held in Fresno, California. Mark your calendars. Hope to see you there. Check out the Lilienfeld Alliance Google site, and if you're a post-secondary instructor, consider signing up for the Alliance. There's no membership fee. Signing off from McEwen University. This is Kat McLeod.
Hallo aan alle Nederlandse luisteraars. Op dit moment bent u aan het luisteren naar de Skeptic Zone, voor wetenschap en kritisch nadenken. Voor meer informatie ga naar www.skepticzone.tv.
Now in the Trove segment, we pick up from last week, part 2 of our look into reports of Uri Geller, dated from the 8th of December 1973, as published in the Age newspaper. Geller's performance on the Dimbleby Talk-In, that was a TV show, seemed utterly convincing, with its close-ups of a breaking fork. But even here, trickery is possible. Last week, Dr. Chris Evans, a psychologist who works at the National Physical Laboratory and takes a highly skeptical extracurricular interest in the paranormal, amazed his colleagues at the NPL canteen by apparently reproducing this dramatic manifestation of the Geller effect. He did it by repeatedly bending the fork to weaken it before appearing, so that gentle stroking was enough to break off the head. He points out that the forks were on the table in the studio for 8 minutes. He timed it before Geller bent one. Of course, there is a great deal that nobody has even begun to explain in terms of trickery, such as the watch hand bent under the glass, but even so, nagging doubts remain. Even if you are convinced that the Geller effect is genuine, as I am, the evidence is not good enough to convince a really determined skeptic. He can usually find some alternative explanation involving trickery. And a couple of hours with James Randi might have shed some more light for this reporter. In more than 1,000 public performances and private demonstrations, Geller has never been caught cheating in any way. A truly remarkable record if he is a magician. But in an extremely hostile article on him last spring, Time magazine made some allegations that came pretty close to an accusation of fraud. At one stage, according to Time, Geller's powers were investigated by the US Department of Defense. One of these investigators claims to have seen Geller peeping when he should have been hiding his eyes, and a demonstration of his ability to move the needle of a magnetometer, an instrument very like a compass, was discredited when one of the investigators noticed Geller apparently vibrating the floor. By doing the same thing, the investigator was able to move the needle further than Geller. At a demonstration in Times offices, Geller was watched in action by a professional magician called James Randi, masquerading as a reporter. Afterwards, Randi duplicated all Geller's feats and claimed that the fork bending was done by hand when the attention of the audience was distracted. If this is the case, it is difficult to see how Geller could possibly perform on television. Oh, it's possible. Believe me, it's possible. One of the lasting memories I have was I was on a chat show many years ago. In fact, it was a pilot for a chat show that I don't think ever went to air. Nevertheless, I was sitting next to Simon Turnbull, the late Simon Turnbull, president of the Australian Psychics Association. And during the course of the TV interview, I passed out spoons to Simon, the host, and a UFO enthusiast, and then proceeded to bend a spoon, much to the chagrin and disbelief of Simon Turnbull. Now, that would be a tape I'd like to have. Anyway, we recap. It is difficult to see how Geller could possibly perform on television. If the picture is showing a close-up of hands and the fork, there would be no way of distracting the audience's attention open to him. Want to bet? While Geller's critics have had virtually no success in showing that he is really a magician, not having paranormal powers, he has made himself extremely vulnerable to ridicule and is likely to become more so. Geller's friend and mentor in the United States is a New York doctor called Andrea Paharic, and I hope I've pronounced that correctly. It was Paharic who discovered Geller in Israel and brought him to America 2 years ago. He has written a book about Geller, due out early next year, which by all accounts is not likely to increase Geller's chances of being taken seriously by skeptical scientists. In an interview with an American magazine called Psychic, Paharic gave some hints of the book's tone. He has described an incident in which he and Geller had driven into the desert and found an unidentified flying object. Quote, a disc-shaped metal object with a blue light flashing on top. End quote. Geller, according to Paharic, entered the UFO while Paharic filmed him. He also filmed him emerging 10 minutes later. Unfortunately, Paharic explained, the record was lost as the film cartridge dematerialized a few minutes later. Sounds completely plausible. With friends like this, Geller has no need for detractors. While his detractors require to remove the suspicion that he is merely a magician of genius, is a set of carefully controlled experiments by people who have no prior commitment to psychical research, with filmed or videotaped records to show there was no sleight of hand. In fact, Geller has already cooperated in an investigation which nearly meets the bill. A year ago, he spent 6 weeks at the Stanford Research Institute, a reputable organization which carries out sponsored research in California, working with 2 physicists, Dr. Harold E. Puthoff and Russell Targ. Incidentally, they are referred to in James Randi's book Flim Flam as the Laurel and Hardy of Psi. In a meeting in New York this year, they presented some of their results. In an experiment which Geller has to guess the uppermost face of a disc shaken in a metal box, he passed twice because he was uncertain, as he was allowed to do under the rules of the experiment, and was right the other 8 times. The odds against this happening by chance are 1,000,000 to 1. Yes, they're right. By chance. 10 times he successfully guessed which of 10 identical aluminium film cans contained an object such as a ball bearing or a sugar cube. He passed twice, but made no mistakes. Geller made almost exact reproductions of 7 simple pictures in sealed envelopes. There were no errors. Needless to say, that is simply another trick out of the magician's manuals. Most remarkable of all were two experiments in which Geller physically disturbed laboratory instruments without touching them. In one, he made the pan of a precision balance under a big glass jar move several times by amounts of 10 to 100 times greater than could be produced by striking the bell jar or the table or jumping on the floor. I'm not sure if that sentence scans quite okay, but I think you get the idea. In the other, he was able to move the needle of a magnetometer without touching it. Puthoff and Tag took great care in designing their experiments to exclude all possibilities of trickery. In the picture-guessing series, for example, the pictures were drawn when Geller was not at the Institute and placed in the envelopes in a safe by an assistant not associated with the experiment. Everything was filmed, and all the experiments in which the experimenters could even think of a way of cheating were discontinued. Nevertheless, the experiments were not entirely satisfactory in several respects. SRI, Stanford Research Institute, has been very tight-lipped about them and has refused to say a word apart from the report in the New York meeting. There are rumors of even stranger incidents during the experiments, objects materializing and dematerializing. Another series is clearly called for, conducted more openly and not quite so restricted in its scope. SRI, for example, did not report on Geller's metal bending ability at all, though this is in some ways the easiest to study. At least there is something physical there to examine. 2 weeks ago, the New Scientist, in a skeptical editorial, issued a challenge to Geller, which he could hardly refuse, and continue to maintain that he is prepared to cooperate in serious investigations of his powers. Well, of course, he's been doing that for the last 50-plus years. The magazine has set up an informal committee, including 2 members of its staff, a psychologist, a professional magician, and an independent journalist, and invites Geller to demonstrate his powers in front of them. Everything the New Scientist says will be recorded on videotape and all results published in the magazine. There is probably a lot more to be said for this kind of informal investigation than for more semi-secret experiments by scientists terrified of making fools of themselves. Geller has promised to come back in the new year to do some experiments with Professor John Taylor, a theoretical physicist in the mathematics department of King's College London, who appeared on the program with him, so perhaps he will be able to take up the New Scientist's challenge then. But since other claimants are coming forward, there is no need for research on the Geller effect to stand still. There are plenty of obvious lines to pursue. How common is the ability to bend metal by mind power? Can it be developed? Is it always associated with clairvoyance and the like? Are there any measurable effects on the metal? Can the effects be reproduced by other means? Does the power to bend metal obey any laws at all with regards to distance, size, shape, material, thickness, and so on? There are some scientists who, while not totally disbelieving in telepathy and the like, cannot see any way of getting to grips with it. Uri Geller has given them some leverage on the paranormal. The forks, whether they are bent by trickery or by mysterious forces, are there to inspect. This has already caused a marked change in attitudes among conventional scientists. British government laboratories, for example, are beginning to show a glimmer of interest in the subject. Suppose the Geller effect does become scientifically well established for the Science Research Council to start giving grants for investigating it, and for the Royal Society to discuss, what is it all likely to lead to? The answer to that question is quite literally closer to science fiction than to conventional science. A vivid imagination is more useful than a knowledge of the laws of physics. Uri Geller claims he could, given time, stop Big Ben. He is alleged to have already stopped an escalator in Munich. That's a very dangerous thing to do. He claims that nothing unpleasant ever happens because of his powers. He certainly has no qualms about flying. But if he can stop an escalator, why not an aeroplane? As soon as one starts to think about the implications of the Geller effect outside the TV studio and research laboratory, it becomes terrifying or ludicrous, depending on whether you believe in it or not. At one extreme, Uri Geller could simply be exposed as a fraud. At the other, missiles could be knocked out of the sky by mind power alone. But these are not the only ways in which the affair can develop. There is a third, altogether more boring possibility. The Geller effect could turn out to be real, but rare and useless, except for doing tricks. It could become a kind of scientific backwater, useless in practical terms and incomprehensible theoretically, and therefore disliked. I have a nasty feeling that this is the way it is going to turn out. And that's where the article ends. And of course, we look back upon this article with 50 years of further knowledge of what transpired. And a good line of thinking here is that spoon bending and Geller's tricks are now all but forgotten. And if they were real, I mean, if this was a genuine breakthrough in science or the paranormal or something, they would not be forgotten. They would be just simply known and part of our scientific understanding. What is part of our scientific understanding is the way the tricks work. So there we go, a very interesting slice of history, all the way back there from 1973, and originally I would suggest published in the Daily Mirror in the UK and then reproduced in The Age here in Australia on December the 8th, 1973. But you too can find out about spoon bending, if you want, I guess, by going to Trove at trove.nla.gov.au or your local library or any of the other online newspaper archives, because when you do that, you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast, and thank you to those people who continue to support the show via PayPal or Patreon. Now, you might be interested if you listen to the Skeptoid podcast, and I hope you do. The latest episode is by none other than our own reporter, Adrian Hill, and this follows on another reporter, Kat McLeod, some weeks ago, doing an episode on Skeptoid. Head for skeptoid.com and listen to Adrian Hill deliver a Skeptoid episode. Well done, Adrian. Well done, Kat. And well done to the Skeptoid team for a very enjoyable adventure in the Bermuda Triangle. And if you like adventure and skepticism, then the Skeptoid team are the people for you. Coming up on next week's show, I chat to author Peter Lamont from Edinburgh about his latest book, Radical Thinking, How to See the Bigger Picture. It's all about why we think the way we do and how to think rationally or critically. A very interesting book indeed. More about that next week. Now, coming up here in Sydney next month, Sydney Skeptics in the Pub, which should be on the 7th of August, we're going to be showing the masterpiece, James Randi in Australia. And we hope to have some special guests there along too. So look out for Sydney Skeptics in the Pub. It's on at the Occidental Hotel in Wynyard. People in Sydney know where that is, I think. And that kicks off around 6 p.m. So put it in your diary if you're in the Sydney area. The first Thursday of the month, which next month is the 7th of August. Well, that's all for this week. So this is Richard Saunders signing off from a pre-dawn and cool and cold Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.
In person. Where? On Spirit Dog Jewel. Can you please refrain from making noise?